This video explains working with bilaterally symmetrical fabrics and using templates to make our Spellbound quilt in Modern Quilts Illustrated number 11.
Hi, I'm Weeks Ringel from Modern Quilt Studio. I want to give you some tips on making the Spellbound quilt in issue 11 of Modern Quilts Illustrated. And I want to start with choosing fabric. So bilaterally symmetrical fabrics is the term used for fabrics that are the same on the right and the left. Bilateral, two sides. Okay. So for example, this is a really great example of a bilaterally symmetrical fabric, because if you had a line down the center of it, it would be exactly the same on the right as it is on the left. In this particular fabric, you can actually even go bilaterally symmetrical in the other direction, where this would be the same as this. And the repeat is designed that way, and it makes for perfect fabric choices for making kaleidoscope quilts. So let me show you one other example. It's a little hard to see with the orange, so I'll use the ruler. So this is another fabric that's really great for bilateral symmetry. You can see that where the ruler is, if I were to cut right there, it would be exactly the same on the right side as the left side. This particular fabric, you can go in that direction also and have it be bilaterally symmetrical. So if our goal is to end up with pieces like this, where you're seeing the same pieces on the right side as on the left side. So that's what we're shooting for. So let me just tell you how to get there. Okay, so you're gonna print out your template sheet from the digital downloads that we've made available. Be sure to mark your test square here. To make sure that your printer hasn't stretched anything. So you'll just take, there's a 1-inch test square, take a ruler, hold it up against it, and make sure it is the right size before you start cutting everything out. Because there's really not much room for error in kaleidoscope quilts, so you want to make sure everything is going to line up nicely. Then you're going to take template plastic. Template plastic is usually made out of Mylar. Sometimes it has a grid on it, sometimes it doesn't. I like the frosted Mylar the best, because I think that when you put it down on the fabric, it's easiest to see where the template is and where the fabric starts. And if it's clear, it's a little bit harder to see, I think. But go ahead and get your template plastic, and you're going to put it on your templates and trace them, and be sure to trace the mirror lines and the number and letter associated with this particular one. So for example, I've got C2 here that C1 and C2 that I used to cut this fabric out. So let me show you how I did that. You need to make registration marks for I'll show you how the fabric looked before I cut it up. So you'll be able to understand how to do it. Now, once you have bilaterally symmetrical fabric, you can pretty much cut any direction of it. Let me just put these back where they were. As long as the one side matches the other, you're good. Kaleidoscope fabric can be tricky to find, so you want to make sure that you take your time when you're looking for it. So what I did when I was trying to cut these pieces was I chose a part of the repeat that I wanted to mirror, and I did registration points on the templates. So, and then I also put some tape loops. We talk about that in the pattern to make sure things don't slip around. But for example, when I was doing this, I decided I wanted to get part of this repeat. So I with a Sharpie, that's the best way to make registration marks, I traced the top of this diamond and these 5 dots down here at the bottom and one area up here, so you don't have things twisting. If you just do a registration point in the middle, the second time when you move the template, you might end up with a different part of the repeat. So making little registration marks with a Sharpie to make sure you've captured the exact part of the repeat you want is very important. And again, you'll be visualizing how it will look on this line. We could have really cut it anywhere, but we just decided that this was kind of a fun part because this diamond shape would become a different shape. Now I turned it over to the other side to get the other side of the mirror, and you'll notice that the pieces that I've aligned, or the registration marks that I made, will align on the other side as well because it's bilaterally symmetrical. So let's take this away and show you again how it's going to look. You want to make sure that as you're planning which part of the repeat you're going to cut, that you have enough of the fabric you need to get as many parts of the repeat as you need for the pattern. In the kits that we've made for this project, we've put in ample yardage so you can choose different parts of the repeat. But this is not a pattern or a technique that is very efficient, so you need a lot more yardage than you might think. So if you're in the fabric store and you're trying to decide on the yardage, look and see if you have 16 repeats of the motif that you want, because you're going to need, except for the center where you just need 8, for the rest of the quilt you're going to need 16 templates, 16 of your largest template for each piece, to make sure that you can mirror the motifs to put in the kaleidoscope. And I think if you are really careful that you have those 16, you should be fine in terms of fabric quantity. So go ahead and get your templates cut, find some repeats, register them with a Sharpie, and get cutting.
That was even better.
Oh,
it was
okay.
So much clearer.
Good.
One last thing. Do you want to talk, I'm leaving it running, about when you're, like if you're pinning wedges together,
Sure.
to line up the way you would with seams or...
Right.
You know what you're doing.
Yep.
That was like, happy accident.
Good. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
I'm Weeks Ringel from Modern Quilts Studio, and I want to show you how to match up repeats for the Spellbound quilt in Modern Quilts Illustrated number 11. So one of the tricks that that is helpful to master when you're trying to make sure your pattern pieces align is pinning very precisely. So there's a sequence that we go through in the magazine that explains how to pin and what order the sections need to go together in a certain order. But I just want to give you an example of how to make sure that this blue line accurately reflects, and because you don't really want it to be just kind of a near miss when it's pinned. You really want the blue line to appear to continue across the seam. So many people, when they're quilting, always assume you just start sewing at the top and that's all you need to work for to get it done. But I think if you pin more carefully, more strategically, you'll find that you have a better chance of making the lines line up. So the first thing I would do would be to put them together and try to line up on your cutting table the repeats. And you should be able to see, you can even hold them up to see if you can see the parts of the repeats actually lined up. You can see through it. And once you have, you're going to not be pinning just anywhere. You're going to try to pin at the 1/4 inch mark, because that's the part of the repeat that you need to have aligned. So I'm putting my pin at about 1/4 inch away from the raw edge in the middle of the blue line, and I'm going to make sure that it's in the same position on the other piece, and I'm going to pin it. I like to pin perpendicularly, so when you're sewing, it's easy to take them out, but also if you pin at an angle, sometimes the fabric slips. So I'm going to go up a little bit farther along the seam and put in another pin, again in the middle of the aqua line, and I'm going to make sure, look at that, it's perfect, that it lines up there as well. So again, you're not really worried about what happens at the ends, because that all gets made up in the seam allowance. What you want to make sure is that the seam line, everything aligns at the seam line. What happens at the top and bottom is not as important as what happens along the seam line. So I'll do one more. There's another blue repeat down at the bottom here, and I will make sure those align as well. Sometimes fabric repeats aren't as precise as we would like, and sometimes you have to stretch or finagle a little bit to get everything to line up. But this is your best shot at in making sure that happens. So in the green hourglass or infinity motif here, I'm going to pin in the middle, which just happens to be at the 1/4 inch seam allowance, and make sure that it comes out on the other side. So that's how okay, so this is how it's going to look, but you're going to be doing this with the entire wedge eventually when you have all of each wedge assembled and you're assembling the entire kaleidoscope. It's the same strategy. You want to make sure as much as possible the repeats match. Don't worry as much about the tips, just make sure that the repeats radiate around the star.